In the story's outset, we are met with a landscape of utter devastation. Amidst this desolation, the protagonist stands resolute and alone, clutching his sword. Confronted by the malevolent Demon King, whose maleficence poses a grave threat to the entire world, the hero seizes a nearby pebble as an impromptu shield against the impending onslaught. The Demon King, relentless in his pursuit of destruction, hurls an enormous boulder at the hero, who, in a moment of ingenuity, propels the small stone he had picked up earlier towards the colossal one. Astonishingly, the diminutive stone proves its mettle by shattering the mighty boulder. Undeterred, the hero admonishes the Demon King to confront the situation earnestly and fight valiantly. A challenge is issued, and the Demon King, unyielding, accepts with unwavering resolve. Both adversaries unleash their most potent attacks upon each other, culminating in a cacophonous explosion. The impact is severe, leaving both combatants in a dire state. In a poignant moment of shared fate, both the hero and the Demon King drive their swords into one another simultaneously, embracing their ultimate demise as they fall together. Many years elapse, and we encounter Blade, the protagonist of our story, brimming with enthusiasm as he embarks on a new chapter of his life as a regular student. Eager to forge numerous friends, he enters the school premises, greeting fellow students with a warm hello. Unfortunately, some students respond by mocking him, labeling him as foolish. Unfazed by their remarks, Blade endeavors to befriend these individuals, introducing himself and learning their names in return. His genuine efforts yield positive results, and those students agree to befriend him in turn. Fueled by his optimism, Blade envisions making over 100 friends, but someone reminds him that achieving such a feat would entail befriending the entire school. Amidst his aspirations, a red-haired girl named Ernest Flaming arrives and reprimands them for being noisy in the hallway. Reputed as the top student, she is often referred to as Empress within the school community. Unperturbed, Blade approaches her with the intention of establishing a friendship. Ernest, intrigued by his audacity, inquires about his identity, and another student reveals that Blade is a recent transfer student who joined the school today. Ernest remarks that the school only admits individuals with aspirations of becoming heroes, those who dream of saving the world. Blade, however, clarifies that his goal lies in forming friendships rather than aspiring to be a hero. This declaration triggers Ernest's ire as she scolds him for what she perceives as a weak resolve to pursue heroism. Unperturbed, Blade remains steadfast in his intentions, informing Ernest that he needs to meet the headmaster and asks her to guide him to the headmaster's office. Ernest doubts the veracity of Blade's claim, assuming that the headmaster would not waste time on a student like him and suspects he may be fabricating the story. Reluctantly, Ernest brings Blade to the headmaster's office, where she knocks on the door and seeks permission to enter. To her astonishment, the voice granting him entry belongs not to the headmaster but to the king of the country. Overwhelmed by the unexpected presence of royalty, Ernest immediately bows in respect, while Blade boldly engages the king and approaches him. Ernest, concerned about Blade's audacity, intervenes and advises him not to behave recklessly in the presence of the king. Undeterred, Blade acknowledges that he is well aware of the king's identity. Despite Ernest's attempts to rectify his behavior by bowing her head and pleading on his behalf, the king remains unperturbed by Blade's actions. The king goes on to reveal that the previous headmaster held Het in high regard, which surprises Ernest, who had been unaware of the headmaster's departure. Furthermore, the king discloses that he now assumes the role of the headmaster for the school. Ernest finds it hard to believe, given the king's renowned status as a skilled warrior. Nevertheless, she is overjoyed and at a loss for words to express her happiness. Appreciating her excitement, the king asks Ernest to leave the room to allow him to have a private conversation with Blade. This revelation stuns Ernest, and she casts an angry gaze towards Blade as she exits the room. Outside, she vents her frustration by pounding her feet on the ground, unable to comprehend why the king is giving such significance to Blade. Blade, overhearing Ernest's frustrations, shares with the king that Ernest has developed animosity towards him due to the king's involvement. He questions the king's purpose for being there, to which the king explains his desire to aid Blade in regaining his hero powers. However, Blade firmly expresses his desire to lead an ordinary life as a common man, without aspiring to be a hero. The king disregards Blade's wishes and emphasizes the value of the school's students, believing they can assist in the restoration of his powers. The king even plans to modify the school's curriculum to benefit potential heroes like Blade. Blade, however, insists that such measures are unnecessary since the Demon King no longer exists in the world. To support his claim, the king refers to a report detailing the climactic battle between the great hero and the Demon King, resulting in both of their demises. Nonetheless, the king remains convinced that the great hero's powers can be rejuvenated, asserting that Blade himself is the great hero. This revelation perplexes Blade, causing him to question the king's sanity and reasoning behind such a claim. In the school's practice ground, all the students were diligently honing their skills to become accomplished heroes. Ernest stood aside, observing their training. Blade approaches her and greets her, prompting Ernest to question the reason for his presence in an advanced class. Blade explains that he took the lower class exam, but the teacher deemed him fit for the advanced class, though Ernest remains skeptical of this claim. She accuses Blade of using bribery to secure admission into the advanced class, suspecting him of cheating on the exam. Ernest labels him as weak-willed, stating that the school does not admit individuals like him. In response, Blade vehemently denies being weak-willed and reiterates his determination to befriend 100 people at school. Blade proceeds to interact with the other students, attempting to establish friendships. Ernest calls him over and, in a moment of impulse, Blade places his hand on her head, causing her to blush with embarrassment. In a reflexive action, Ernest attacks Blade with her sword, but he swiftly evades the strike, leaving her astonished by his agility. Amidst the training, another student informs the group that the instructor is summoning everyone. Blade tries to befriend this particular student named Sophie, but she remains unresponsive. However, upon Ernest's insistence, she reveals her name to Blade, surprising Ernest herself. Ernest expresses her desire to test Blade's abilities, and although the teacher initially hesitates, Ernest's intense gaze compels him to agree to the challenge. During the test, Ernest presents Blade with an enchanted metal armor and challenges him to cut it into 2 pieces, just like every other advanced class student can do. If he fails to accomplish this task, he would have to admit that he entered the school through illegitimate means and leave. Ernest boasts that the students in the advanced class are of a very high level, at least level 3. In response, Blade nonchalantly asks about their level, prompting Ernest to proudly affirm their standing. Blade readies himself for the attack, visualizing a level 3 technique. His entire body begins to glow as he assumes a striking position with his sword. The students are amazed to witness the power of his attack, realizing it is a Dragon Series attack. Strong winds start swirling around Blade's sword, and he unleashes a mighty whirlwind attack. The armor is completely obliterated by the force of the attack, causing a tornado that breaks through the wall and rises into the sky. All the students collide with the wall and fall, except for Sophie, who remains unscathed. Even Blade's sword shatters into pieces due to the overwhelming force. Ernest approaches Blade and questions his identity. Observing the aftermath of his attack, Blade realizes that he has expended too much of his powers, resulting in the worsening condition of Ernest and the other students. He admits to being a common student, understanding that he must have used his abilities excessively in the demonstration. After the intense test, it's time for lunch in the cafeteria. All the students are sitting together, eating their meals, while Ernest sits alone. Blade, however, chooses to sit next to her. He notices his other friends and invites them to join him, but they refuse, dissuading him when they see him sitting with Ernest. Confused by their reluctance, Blade asks Ernest why they refuse to join them. She explains that the table they are sitting at is reserved for her, and people fear her, which is why they avoid joining them. Blade wonders why she instills fear in others. Ernest begins eating her food without directly answering his question, and Blade follows suit, enjoying the simple curry. Ernest acknowledges that she should not have accused Blade of cheating to gain admission to the school. Blade, however, doesn't recall the incident, which frustrates Ernest as she finds it bothersome that he doesn't remember it. Blade, in his carefree manner, tells her that he doesn't dwell on such things, reassuring her that there's no need to worry. Ernest acknowledges his talent and apologizes to him. Blade, in turn, expresses gratitude for her assistance. Surprised by his gratitude, Ernest asks why he is thanking her. Blade explains that he's new to the school, and she is his first friend, which causes Ernest to blush, though this time she refrains from threatening him with her sword. As night descends, Ernest finds herself contemplating her encounter with Blade in her room. She wonders if the shared meal has transformed them into friends, and a smile graces her face as she fondly refers to him as her very first friend. However, her moment of introspection is interrupted when the sword hanging on the wall begins to tremble. Ernest's attention is drawn to the sword, which triggers memories from her past. In her younger days, she had black hair, and there was an instance when she approached the sword, which urged her to surrender herself. Upon touching the sword, all of her hair had inexplicably turned red, signifying its control over her. However, she managed to regain control of herself over time, even though the sword continues to attempt to overpower her. Despite the struggle, Ernest is determined not to let go of that sword, hinting at the deep connection she holds with it. The next morning, the students engage in practice fights. Leonard confronts Ernest, who urges him to take the fight seriously. He readies his lance to attack, and Blade enjoys watching the competition. Leonard charges at Ernest with his lance, but she skillfully uses her sword to blow him into the air. However, Ernest's sword possesses her, and she attacks Leonard when he falls back to the ground. In a display of self-control, she manages to halt the attack midway. Next, Sophie steps forward to spar with Ernest, but upon seeing her tired condition, Sophie suggests that she takes a rest. However, Ernest insists on continuing the fight. Despite Sophie's attempt to use her knuckles, she is quickly defeated by Ernest's magic sword attacks. Afterward, Ernest challenges Blade to a fight, but she starts gasping for breath due to exhaustion. Concerned for her well-being, Blade questions whether she can compete in such a condition. Still, Ernest is determined to proceed with the fight. Suddenly, the sword slips from her hand, and she faints, falling to the ground. Blade quickly catches her to prevent any injury, but Ernest remains unconscious. Blade brings Ernest to the infirmary, but the doctor informs him that she can do little more to help her. Blade urges the doctor to heal Ernest completely, as she had done for him earlier. However, the doctor explains that while she can cure even the gravely ill, the curse affecting Ernest is beyond her capabilities. Ernest regains consciousness and asks about her whereabouts. Blade informs her that she fainted, and he brought her to the doctor. Feeling responsible and believing she may have harmed someone, Ernest starts to leave. Blade reassures her that she didn't harm anyone, she merely fainted. Though she feels better now and wants to leave, the doctor advises against it. However, Blade assures the doctor that Ernest seems fine and that he will take care of her. Relenting, the doctor allows them to go. Blade supports Ernest as they walk out of the infirmary together. Seeing other students ahead, Ernest attempts to distance herself from Blade. But he reminds her that they are friends and can help each other. Reluctantly, Ernest leaves but requests that Blade keeps her curse a secret from others. At nightfall, Blade decides to break into the school's data center to gather information. Using the crystal he received from the king, he gains access to the data center and finds a file containing information about Ernest's demon sword. After reading the information, he comes to a realization. The next morning, Blade requests a private conversation with Ernest. At first, she assumes he wants to threaten her to take her top position. But Blade clarifies that he doesn't care about such things and that she is more important to him. He reveals that he knows the secret of her sword, which prompts Ernest to join him for the conversation. Ernest discloses that her sword is alive and grants immense power to its owner. She explains that when she was only 6 years old, she accidentally touched the cursed demon sword. As a result, the sword's desire for blood and destruction infiltrated her body, leading to her having to control those dark urges. She reveals that to overcome the sword's influence, she must make a pact with it, but she fears that she might lose control, unleashing the demon within her and causing chaos. Blade reassures Ernest that he will stop the demon if it ever emerges, and advises her to try making a pact with the sword without fear. He reminds her of the wall he had broken during his previous attack and asks if she doubts his power. Ernest responds that she trusts him, indicating her willingness to confront her fears and seek a resolution. On a moonlit night, Ernest commences the process of forming a pact with the sword demon Asmodeus, with Blade standing nearby as a witness. As she begins, her body becomes engulfed in flames. Blade reassures her, expressing his trust in her, and Ernest reciprocates, expressing her confidence that he will handle the demon if needed. Before Ernest stands the formidable Asmodeus, a massive entity restrained by chains. She implores him to become her servant, but in response, Asmodeus asserts his identity as the embodiment of fire and ruin, doubting her ability to confront him. Undeterred, Ernest resolves to engage in battle. Both Ernest and Asmodeus clash with immense force, while Blade remains on the sidelines, observing. Asmodeus starts to overpower Ernest, leading him to attack Blade, who retaliates by pushing him away. Ernest manages to regain control over herself and summons a sword to prepare for the battle. Asmodeus breaks free from his chains and confronts Ernest, launching Kamehameha-like energy beams at her, while she counters with her sword's smoldering fire. Their powers collide in a powerful clash. Blade continues watching from outside as the fiery whirlwind dissipates, causing Ernest to begin falling. In a swift move, Blade runs and catches her. Ernest smiles, affirming that she has emerged victorious. Blade celebrates her triumph. The following day, Ernest greets everyone at school with a newfound smile, leaving everyone amazed by her transformation. Blade watches from a distance, filled with joy and contentment at seeing the positive change in Ernest.